All right, hello. Today it's me, Tiller, and we're reviewing or doing a rant and rave of Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, specifically the Iki Island expansion. So, to give you a little background, I played Ghost of Tsushima last year when it came out, and I really don't have the mental energy to play through the main story again and the entirety of the original Tsushima Island. But I wanted to give my thoughts on the Iki Island expansion, as I wasn't going to, but I feel like now I kind of want to. So, we'll go with my main thoughts, my rant, my rave, and the verdict. So let's get into... Oh, and by the way, if you enjoy the video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. It really helps out. I also live streamed my entire story playthrough via Twitch at twitch.tv/tillerbrick, and you can follow me there for more playthroughs of games I intend to review. Additionally, if you are someone who was looking forward to seeing me play through, or interested in watching me play through Tales of Arise, unfortunately I will not be able to do that because the circumstances do require that I can't exactly stream it due to hardware limitations, as I did not have these limitations before, but currently we are in a situation where I cannot access my regular hardware, so this is a compromise, and that's how it's going to be. So let's start with some original thoughts. I think it's good for me to explain what I thought of the original game so that you guys understand where I'm coming from for this review. So, Ghost of Tsushima was a good game, and I think there was a huge exaggeration on how amazing and unique it was. And before you click off, I'm not saying the game is bad, I just said it was a good game. And just because I say something is bad does not mean I think the game is necessarily bad, it just means the game has flaws. So I'm gonna have to say this multiple times because I don't want people to get the idea that I think the game is bad. I'm just listing some bad things here. The game is a polished version of Assassin's Creed, and I mean that in the kindest way I can. I don't dislike Assassin's Creed games, but essentially what this game does, if it was an Assassin's Creed game, it has removed the present storyline, given the character a unique combat style suited for the region that the game takes place in, polish up interactions and techniques, and make the atmosphere of the game feel more like its own thing as opposed to an Assassin's Creed game. And Ghost does a phenomenal job at what it wants to do and how it wants to look. The story itself starts a little bit slow, but most stories like this do, and it picks up fairly quickly, though it did take me a little while to get into it. I guess my biggest downsides for this game are that horses, because I don't like horses in video games, and I don't totally agree that this game needed to be a full open world experience, but I don't really want to get into that here. So, let's get on with the rant and rave, starting with the rave. So this game is just Ghost of Tsushima. Iki Island expansion is just more Ghost of Tsushima, and that's not a bad thing. They added a few new mechanics, like more complex shrines, flute playing, horse charging. The concept of the story is fairly interesting, and I'm not going to spoil it too much here. And the basic overview of it is that there's a new villain, and she is capable of inducing hallucinations in people. The story focuses on Jin and his past, which is much more interesting once you've completed the main game, in my opinion. I believe both are separate, as Iki Island, I believe, comes available either when Act 2 unlocks or after Act 2. I can't remember which one exactly. And I think letting both be separate is both a good and a bad thing. It does allow players to make the choice of what they want to do when they unlock it. And that's good, because it gives you that freedom to kind of tail off from the main story if you really want to and move to this story. But anyways, I don't have a lot to rave about this game, as it really is just Ghost of Tsushima except the second time. Well, or the expansion is Ghost of Tsushima, but a second time. So I don't want to retread a lot of old ground about Ghost of Tsushima and how much I liked it. or how much I didn't like it, even though I did like it. So I hope my original thoughts made that clear. So yeah, now we're going to get into the rant, and I will be breaking the rant down into 2 parts. The 2 parts are as follows. I'm going to do a basic rant, and then I'm going to do a spoiler rant. I will give a very long warning for spoilers to give you about, hopefully, 15 seconds to get the fuck out of the video if you don't wanna get spoiled by anything. Alright? So, just let that be known. So the first part, the non-spoiler part of the rant, this is gonna be a rough one. I am fond of Ghost of Tsushima's main game and main plot. I am not fond of Iki Island's plot. The plot, in my opinion, is very predictable. And predictable plots are not a bad thing. But what is bad is that I felt like there was an attempt to make me feel something, and I just felt nothing. To me, it feels like a shoehorned experience in the sense that I've completed the main game, and there are references to it. However, there is no reference to the overarching finale of the main game. And this could be a good thing for you if you want to play Iki Island whenever you want instead of waiting for the end of the game. Then by all means, this might be a better story if you play it during that time as well. However, for me, chronologically, I just couldn't put my head in the situation. It felt like something where dialogue should be restructured around whether you finish the game or not, but it feels like there's just little bits of things that are added in instead of like noticeable dialogue changes that make it obvious as to where Jin is in this at this point in the story. And I did explore the open world on my off time instead of doing it on stream, and I had fun with it, but the monotony also started to wear on me a little bit as time went on. I wasn't doing it as a rush, as I took my time, and it maybe took me 6 hours to explore the entire open world. But I did finish the entire story on stream, and that clocked in at about 3 to 4 hours. Tops. And I still have some side missions to do, but I don't think it'll be much longer. And I have no problem with the DLC being short, but I feel like I gained nothing. I feel like this story literally doesn't matter, especially if you finish the main game. I think if you didn't finish the main game, it's actually a fairly interesting path to go down, but if you did, then it's a little problematic. So we're getting into spoiler territory. You guys gonna give you 7 seconds to pack up your shit and get the fuck out of here. That's mean. But yeah, no. I need you guys to go if you don't want to be spoiled on stuff, I guess. Yeah, here's your warning. 3, 2, 1. So, I felt nothing towards these characters. Tenzo starts off as a little interesting. You know, he's willing to trust a samurai, and on top of that, willing to trust Jin Sakai, right? And that's an interesting plot point that they kind of just toss away. Like, it's addressed fairly quickly that he's Jin Sakai, and then it's tossed away, essentially. Like, no one cares anymore. Which is fair because they're in a state of war. However, I feel like it would be interesting to explore this topic a little bit more. Right? Like, why is Tenzo so... or why doesn't Tenzo hesitate to trust Jin? Right? It just feels very... I don't have a great word. Probably not generic, but like very... It's just a missed opportunity. I wasn't mad at him when they revealed that he was the killer of Jin's father. At this point in the story, since I'd finished the main game, it felt like, yeah, okay. You know, Jin's wrestling with the guilt of not saving his dad, but it also felt like Jin wasn't too attached to his dad either. And the end monologue between Jin and his father, even though it's an illusion or whatever, Jin's just facing his past, it doesn't, it feels like Jin was just wrestling with the idea that, oh, he's guilty for not helping his dad, but also he never wanted to be like his father. And he wasn't attached to his father either. So the guilt is there, but it's not that strong. Fune, on the other hand, was literally the most uninteresting of the three main characters in this situation. She has a side story about her daughter and nothing else, and you cannot get me to care about her daughter just because she's addicted to drugs. I'm sorry, but you need a little bit stronger of a reason than that, in my opinion, to make her character interesting. The Eagle also conceptually is very interesting, actually. The fact that she's like causing these hallucinations and letting Jin relive his past through this poison that she gave him. It's a super interesting concept, and it really disappoints me they don't take that further. It becomes essentially this thing that's like a minor interruption, but never really affects the main game's plot. Like, oh, the Eagle is here, and Jin's seeing her, like, he's hallucinating that she's right in front of him, and things like that. But it never costs them much. And by that I mean the main cast. The main cast doesn't feel like they're ever affected by Jin's rash decision to plunge himself into a fight when he is crippled by these hallucinogenics. It's very rare that it feels like it matters. And honestly, her execution is just boring and flat. She just feels like she's there to be an antagonist to the overarching plot. And there's nothing particularly interesting about it. Khan is also a little generic in that regard, but Khan's overwhelming influence over Tsushima, as well as like the turmoil and pain that it's caused Jin and the allies that you meet with, is very clear, and it's very effective in the way it's told in the main story. The Eagle just kind of exists for the sake of having a villain, and that's kind of doo-doo, honestly. And maybe I missed a point, but I feel like the ending of Jin not wanting to be his father is way too obvious. And maybe this is because in my playthrough, I'm doing Iki Island after the main story. And it feels like no one knows that he's the ghost. And also that Jin's final, like the final exchange he has with Shimura is that Shimura says to him, or one of the final exchanges, in the final exchange, that's better, is that Shimura says, "You have no honor." And Jin says to him, "And you are a slave to it." So Jin doesn't care as much about honor anymore. He throughout the entire story, you get that feeling that Jin realizes that the way to save the lives of his people is not to take the path of honor. It's instead to approach the situation as an effective warrior, as an effective tactician, as opposed to a honorable warrior. He abandons it because his enemies do not fight honorably either. They play a dirty game. And that, at its core, is what his story is kind of about, and it feels like this Iki Island thing just ignores all of that. And the fact that no one on Iki knows that he's the ghost, even after the end of like my main playthrough, is just not fun. It's not great. I don't know. Maybe I missed a side quest somewhere where they talk about it, but it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great. And they barely acknowledge how un-samurai-like Jin is. Like, Jin climbs and scales and sneaks around, and they're like, "Never seen a samurai do that." And I'm like, okay, we're gonna talk about it a little bit, you know? Jin gonna mention what he does. I know it's not about the fame. It's never been about the fame for Jin. But it is something that I think would be an interesting topic to bring up. Like, oh, the Ghost of Tsushima. Who is the Ghost of Tsushima? and no one really knows. And then suddenly, like, the people of Iki Island who hate the Sakai family find out that it is Jin Sakai, who is the ghost, and they go, but he doesn't fight with honor, he's not a samurai, right? Because you assume that someone of, like, high class, or I guess royal blood, ruling blood in this situation, would be an honorable samurai, as, you know, the warriors of Japan, whatever, you know. I don't really know history that well, so I don't want to get too much into it, but yeah. Anyways, putting that aside, I loved the original story of Ghost of Tsushima. I think it was fantastic how they made every major side character with a name, different model, all that. They made them different. They made them have backstory. When you played their side quests, you were going through their part of the story. You were doing things with them because they had roles in the main story. They were part of your army. They felt like people you knew. And this did not do it at all. Don't have side quests with Tenzo and barely have a side quest with Fune. It doesn't feel like you really get to know them that well, and that they're just there because, haha, rebellion, we need main characters for Jin to interact with, and they just don't interact as well with Jin as the main cast does. And ultimately, the original story of Ghost of Tsushima had both a main conflict, an inner conflict with the main character, and other conflicts that involve the side characters. All of these are resolved by the end of the game and feel organic to each person's situation and to the overall situation. Iki Island has a main conflict, the Eagle, an inner conflict, Jin's past, and no side character conflicts that feel like they affect the main story or have something to do with the main story at all. And ultimately, the main one falls short. The Eagle's concept is interesting, but she's not very threatening because it never forces Jin to do something that's entirely different from what he used to do. That's the entire original Ghost of Tsushima plot is him doing something that he's not used to doing. And it makes him a more effective warrior and someone who is willing to put his honor on the line just to save his men. And that's a good story. This one is the Eagle, Jin's hallucinating, but guess what? It doesn't matter because the situation's gonna work out in the end anyways, and no one's gonna get hurt or die in major fights. No one that you know is gonna get hurt, even emotionally, really, and it's awful. It's really disappointing. That's the word I'm looking for. It feels like all the conflicts in Iki Island are underdeveloped, undercooked, and unfocused. And it makes me mad because the original game's writing was good. So, ultimate verdict. If you're looking to buy Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, I'd say Ghost of Tsushima is a good game. But the Iki Island expansion feels undercooked. It's like there's a perfectly baked cake, and then you slapped some fucking fondant on that shit. Alright? I guess that's like the best way I can put it. It's that this whole thing is good, and then they wanted to add a little bit more to it. And the gameplay still feels good. You know, it still looks beautiful. But now it kind of tastes a little weird. It doesn't feel right. It feels like content that's pushed in there for the sake of having content to convince people to buy this game again, to spend the 20, to spend the 30 on the director's cut. And it doesn't do much for me. And the sad part of this is that I recently played Watch Dogs Legion's story DLC. And that to me was better than the fucking main game. And I'm not asking for Ghost of Tsushima's expansion to be better than the main game, but I wanted it to at least compare in some way, but this is just night and day. Like, the original story is so much better than the DLC one, and it doesn't compare. Meanwhile, the Watch Dogs Legion one, barring all the problems that Legion has on its own, which is a lot, the story for that was just as good, if not better, on the DLC than the main game. So, yes. Anyways, that comparison aside, Ghost is a good game. Iki Island doesn't do much for me. And I would not recommend the expansion unless you are absolutely hungry for more Ghost of Tsushima content. And what I recommend you do is that if you really just want to play Ghost of Tsushima, you buy the PS4 version. You buy the original PS4 version, and you play it. It's $20 less already. If you really feel like you want more when you've completely finished Tsushima, then you buy the Iki Island expansion. There's no reason to purchase the Iki Island expansion right off the bat. That's my opinion. If you're really a stickler for visuals and you have a PS5, then sure, you can spend the $70 on the PS5 edition of the game, but I genuinely don't see how that's worth it, just because the stuff they added to Director's Cut for an extra $30 doesn't feel worth it, when other companies are offering those same enhancements for free, and also when other companies are making story DLC that's cheaper and just feels better when it's added to the main plot. And really, my verdict is just, I don't have a desire to go back to Iki Island and try to finish the side quests. I don't feel like finishing the side content anymore, and that might make people upset. But I don't think Iki Island is particularly awful. I'm just not in love with it. I don't like it that much, and it's just disappointing. It's really the easiest way to describe it is disappointing, because I enjoyed the main game so much. But anyways, this has been my verdict. This has been Rant and Rave. This has been Till. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys again next week with another video.